Today we're looking at Psalm 140, and it just hit me that we have 11 Psalms to go, 11 days, and then we'll go into Proverbs for 31 days. It's going to be a lot of fun. This is one of deliverance, very simple, talking about God's strength and His salvation. Deliver me, O Lord, from the evil man. Preserve me from the violent man, who imagines mischief in their hearts continually. Are they gathered together for war? He's going to go on and talk about how his enemies are rising. Keep me, O Lord, and again this is Yahweh, from the hands of the wicked. The proud have hid a snare for me, and cords they have spread a net by the wayside. They have set jinns, which is demons, for me. These guys are casting spells. This is ardent attack. It isn't just a passive, I don't like you. This is an ardent attack on this believer. I love what he says in 7 because he goes, O Elohim Adonai. This is one of the few times, usually it's Adonai Elohim. This one's O Elohim Adonai. And again, look at the placement of words. It isn't random. There's a reason why the author is saying Yahweh my Adonai, Yahweh the Adonai, the only Adonai. Yahweh is the only Adonai. Strength of my salvation, thou hast covered my head in the day of battle. I love that. My head is down in the day of battle. You've covered me. Grant not, O Yahweh, the desires of the wicked. Further not their wicked device, lest they exalt themselves. You know, he talks about this. Let burning coals fall upon them. Let them be cast into the fire, into the deep. Talking about what happens to the enemies of God. See, these people are not just enemies because of a personal thing. They're enemies because they're standing for God. At the very last, I know that the Lord will maintain the cause of the afflicted and the right of the poor. Our rights are not established just by our government and by our own selves, but these are the rights of God. The right of the poor to be heard by God. Surely the righteous shall give thanks unto thy name, and the upright shall dwell in thy presence. So again, beginning with, I'm in trouble, please deliver me, but I will be in your presence, and in your presence is safety. It's a very wonderful little psalm right there. They're pretty small, moving on. We don't have a lot of big ones, and I think it's going to be a nice 10 more days. Not trying to hurry out of it, but I like what we're gleaming from these, but also like to move on. Going back to 1 Kings, we spent a lot of time in 6 yesterday. I had to break it into 2 pieces to do that. 7 is also a big one. I can move a little faster on 7 because we're talking about things exterior. Chapter 6 was all about setting up the temple, and actually it's not that complex a building. You're making this certain building, you're building it with stones, you're putting cedar on it, you're putting gold on the inside, but you're also carving on the cedar first. Then you're going to move in maybe 3 pieces of furniture and have this partition that they will weave in, and it has weavings of cherubim, etc., and palm trees and these things. And they're specific about what they want. You can't just write anything on the walls. You can't just put anything in there. He's specific about what he puts in there. They're beautiful things that have a lot of they have a lot of golden mean, a lot of curvature. It would be a beautiful, peaceful place. Like I said, when you close the doors, you were in a virtual world. You could sit and just almost forget that there are seams, and you're in this big golden place with beauty on the walls. And inside that beauty is the food, is the light, and is the king. So again, a very beautiful place has been made. They built that and gave it a foundation. They worked on the exterior to build a courtyard. Pretty simple, just raise some walls and put in some little rooms. They set those up. You'll see that in most of the renditions. He talks about, again, with dealing with the laver, which is the giant bowl, a giant sea that they created. And you have that thing that's being created. You're also having the pillars that created for the front. And those pillars are very important to hold it up. And those pillars, it seems important here that in chapter 7, we get an idea of some of the support and the care that was gone into the support. We always have to remember that God is giving us details. He isn't just slapping it together and saying, okay, we're done, we put this together overnight. If you remember, the tabernacle was very detailed. We have some pillars, again, I mentioned earlier, that I'm going to show you a picture of right here. This is the type of pillars we're talking about. When we call about chapatiers, we're talking about these things on the top. You remember, you've seen this like with Grecian pillars, that they'll go straight up and then they'll curve out You know, they're not just for support. Those are also things for beauty and decorative. He's making the door beautiful. What is the door to the temple? It's Christ. So again, we're looking at the beauty of the door and the pillars that are holding up. And so he even gives them names. Joktan and Boaz. These are the ones for holding up the pillars that are holding up. These are beautiful pillars. It says it took him 13 years to build his house. He starts in chapter 7. And he talks about the building of his house and what it was like and how big it was. God cares how you live. And the king's house was not bigger, not more grandiose than the temple. We also have to realize that when we see some of the dimensions here, it might be wider and it might be longer, but it wasn't taller. We are never to eclipse our God. No matter what he does in our lives and spreads us out and moves us on and makes us great and gives us greatness, we're never taller than he is. We're never bigger than he is. This temple would be seen, could be seen for miles, and it's sitting on a hill, Jerusalem. So in Jerusalem, there's this temple that you can see for miles. And so he talks about the building of his house. He talks about his porch, and he set up his porch on purpose so that he might sit there and judge as king. Once again, he's not a king who is there to just be pompous. He's there to judge. He's there to be with the people. He's there to effect judgment for the people. His job in peacetime is to judge and rule the people and to rule the economy and to rule the military and how they keep the other people in their places. And there was peace, remember, all in the time of Solomon, because Solomon stood in his place doing what he was supposed to do. Talks about Pharaoh's wife, setting up her place. Again, there were no harems that we understand here. Each wife would have their own place. Maybe they were in different parts, you know, maybe in different areas, and he would go around and, you know, when he's doing a little bit of a, you know, he's off being a king, you know, traveling around and stuff. He would have different wives in different places. He talks about they were costly stones. This wasn't cheap stuff. He doesn't just go, you know, to Home Depot and get the stuff off the sale rack. These were costly stones. Again, building his house would be a costly thing. So he's got that going. And then he talks about all of that and the cedars and the rows and the beautiful things that were happening there. He gets a hold of Hiram of Tyre, who seemed to also be, he was Jewish. He was half Jewish. On his mother's side, his father was in Tyre. He was a worker in brass. And again, brass is something you do, you know, for beauty and for strength. Also, it's a strong metal. And he's a worker in brass with cunning and understanding in all brass works. Now remember, again, when we think back 400 years to the time of the building of the tabernacle, you had Bezalel, remember him, and Aholiab. Remember the two guys, Bezalel and Aholiab? God had given them cunning, and they created or oversaw the creating of the canopies over the tabernacle, the building of the tabernacle, the beauty of the tabernacle that he gave them. God gave them cunning. Bezalel and Aholiab. I'm going to make sure I say that right. I'm trying to get these names as correct as possible. And they had this cunning given to them by God. Many of us have cunning given to us by God. We need to find what God wants us to do with our talents. So he calls in Hiram, and Hiram oversees this. He doesn't do all the work himself. And he casts these two pillars, again, like I was showing you. He creates these pillars, and he creates the top, the capiteers is what they're called, capiteers. And so they have these capiteers, and they're very interwoven. They're very beautiful. Again, the gate to God is a beautiful gate. Who is that gate? That gate is Jesus. And he talks about the networks. He talks about the pomegranates. He talks about how they created all of that. And these are beautiful, strong pillars created by Hiram. They're not just decorative in the sense they look nice. The existence of beauty in the temple is to draw people to it also. The beauty of who Christ is, the beauty of who Messiah is to draw people to. This idea of a more staunch, empty, lonely, vacant, nothing on the walls kind of church or kind of worship is not what God had envisioned. He is beauty. And this is a beautiful building. Again, once you go in, it's overlaid with carvings that are overlaid with gold, and the light that reflects back and forth, and the light of the candle. It says something interesting here that I passed over. They went light against the light. It's very possible that you've seen to where if you have a window cut a certain way, that if you cut it a different way, the light will bend in at different ways. So they had these set up not just straight, but they would bend so the light would come in and reflect off of one another. It's almost like, you know, making a light from like a TV set or something, where you have these big lights that cross one another. So again, you'd have that crossing and the reflecting off of the gold, and you had the lights that were flickering. Again, and this would change as the sun changed. This would change as it became cloudy. This would change as the sun came up in the morning and went down at night. If you stayed in there for a while, the whole ambiance would change based on where the sun was and how it reflected in off of these windows that were created. They weren't just square. Some of them could have been oblong in different angles, so the light would come in a different way. Beautiful, great design here. This thing is really coming together wonderfully. So he's got these pillars that are created, and he talks about creating the molten sea. And again, I got a picture here of what that would look like here. There's also the little ones we'll talk about later, that these were for ceremonial washings. You could move these around back and forth. This was a big sea, probably also maybe these carried water to the sea. So that's the next thing they created. He creates this big molten sea, and he talks about the brim of it and how big it would be and how wide it would be. He says that the height was 5 cubits. So again, we're going to call it 5 feet. If you want to work out the cubits, a cubit is actually 20 inches. Do the math, get the height correct. But just for us, just for this understanding, it's easy to think of a 5 foot by 30 foot. So its height was 5 foot, and the line of its cubit, it was 30 feet across. So again, you got it 5 foot high, 30 feet across, this great big basin that would filled with water. This is where they did the cleansing for the temple. And they had 12 oxen under it, as you saw in the picture. You had 12 oxen on the bottom, facing, 3 facing in all the directions. And again, the ox is a servant of, is a symbol of servitude, a symbol of a servant. Sometimes Jesus is seen as the ox, the servant. And what's on the backs of the ox is a place of cleansing for the priest that they could immerse in. It's like baptism. You'll see these balances, these typologies here. The symbolism is here, that they would go in and have to immerse themselves after they were clean. They would immerse themselves and be consecrated. Remember that the priest would have to shave off all their hair. They would have to get rid of their clothing, clean themselves up, and then be immersed in consecration. That's what baptism is symbolic of, is that immersion into the water and coming out consecrated to God. But you remove all of the sin. Christ removes the sin first, then we immerse and come out and consecrate it to God. It's a beautiful thing, and it's right here. And you're on the back of an ox, and this ox faces the 4 directions so that anyone coming to it from any direction could find salvation. So again, there's a lot here. I know that, and this is inside the temple court. It was there for the Levites and for the sons of Aaron. But God opens that court up now, and all of us can go in. All of us can come to the ox, which is Christ. We can be cleansed, and we can be dipped into the water and come out consecrated. Again, this whole thing just comes right together. The reason for this is clear. So we have him creating this thing, and he talks about it. He talks about the brim. It's beautiful also. It's not just a big bowl, but there's lilies and there's flowers. It's beautiful, carvings on it, because God's a beautiful God. And so we have this happening here. It held 2,000 baths. I didn't do any work. I'm sorry that I didn't look it up how much a bath is. Should have done that. So you get the idea that it holds a lot of water. Again, for physical immersion. The other little ones will be for hand washings, and for dealing with for keeping yourself clean as you deal with as you deal with the area. And he made 10 bases of brass, 4 cubits in one length and 4 cubits in breadth another. And these are he made borders and legs. And on these, he put lions and oxen and cherubims. We're talking about now these little ones. We're going to talk about them. That is creating these. And again, lions, oxen, and cherubim. You don't get to just put anything on there you want. Like, I think a chicken would be cool, or I want to put on a duck. No, a lion, lion of the tribe of Judah, strong, strength. Oxen, servant. Who's that? Cherubim, holy. Again, this whole thing points to Christ. It's very beautiful what's on here. There's so much here that I get a little tongue-tied. There's so much here, and I can't go through all of it. I want to, but I need you to glean through it on yourself. I need you to do the grid on it and walk it and see what's here. You'll see things that I'm not talking about. I'm trying to just cover the tops. And he talks about the borders. He talks about the wheels. Again, the gospel is mobile. You don't go, you don't go to the gospel. The gospel can come to you. And he made all the spokes. And again, these there were ledges of, and a cherubim, lions, and palm trees. Very beautiful. And he makes these 10 lavers, and they hold 40 baths each, so that there's enough water for cleansing. If you're washing your hands or having to wash yourself off, having to clean up, okay, because you handled something, you handled part of the sacrifice, all this kind of stuff. You have to clean yourself off, so that's a more practical application to these lavers that people would have. Would have there. And Hiram made the lavers, and he also made the shovels, the basins, all the things that were going to be needed. The 2 pillars and the 2 bowls and the calipers were on the top of the 2 pillars. He created all of that. 400 pomegranates on networks, so there was a networking of pomegranates were going like this wreath. Beautiful thing that was tapestry that was going around, also connecting things. Remember what I said yesterday. The artistic renditions that you see in your Bible and that you see on the internet are just as equal to the speculations you can put in your mind. That you can build this in your mind and see it for what it is, and your ideas and the mathematics, and here's for you to see this. I mean, you can go to the YouTubes, that's fine. I went to a couple of them, and you can go look at pictures, that's fine too. But also, make sure that what you're seeing balances with what you're saying here. And he talks about the 12 oxen some more, and the pots and the shovels that were made, which Hiram made to King Solomon for the house of bright brass. So again, this is bright brass. It's strong, it's beautiful, it's bright. Brass is a very strong metal. In the plains of the Jordan did the In the plain of the Jordan did the king cast them in the clay ground over near Succoth. So he didn't do this casting of this stuff on site. He went off someplace for the smelting. He went off someplace for the boiling, for the pounding. You would have to boil it. You would have to create a mold. You would have to pour it into the mold. And after it cooled, you would have to take it and chisel away at it and bang away at it and pound on it and make it fit the way you want it to fit. It's a very loud thing to do, and they didn't have that work going on. Again, none of this work happened at the place, at the temple. It happened far away, and they would bring this stuff in already made and ready to go. Our salvation is brought to us already made and ready to go. God had it made off-site. It was made off-site by Christ, and it's going to come in. And there was so much here that Solomon couldn't count it all, how much they needed and how much they had. He didn't even bother. There was no weight to be found. There was just so much brass available. And it makes you wonder, how much brass were you needing? But they used a lot of brass here. And all the vessels that pertain to the house of God, the altar of gold and the table of gold, and the showbread, where they put the showbread, and the candlesticks, 5 on the right and 5 on the left, before the oracle, and the flowers and the lamps and the tongues of gold, and the bowls and the snuffers, and the basins, and the spoons, and the censers, and the hinges of the door, and the doors for the inner door were made of gold, or covered with gold. So the end of all this work that the King Solomon made for the house of God, and Solomon brought in the things that his father David had dedicated, even the silver and the gold and the vessels. He put these among the treasures of the house of the Lord. So you got the idea that many of these side rooms would also hold treasures that had been dedicated to the Lord. So again, you're seeing this whole proper is now being made. And we realize also it took 7 years to build all of this. 7 years to put all of this together. We try in a hurry to get to the cross. And yet sometimes maybe we should read our Bibles for 7 years before we do anything. We're on a foot race to salvation of souls. Maybe we need to take time. In 2016, I was challenged to read this cover to cover because I never had. And I've read it 7 times. In the 8th time, that's when I started doing this little video diary, video platform, whatever you want to call it. I've learned so much from it. And I've offered it to my family and to my friends. If they want to watch it, great. If they don't. But the point is, maybe we shouldn't be in such a rush. Let God build you in the time it takes to build you. Let God make you beautiful. I've also been doing keto, and I've been doing fasting, and I've been taking this physical temple and making it more attractive. You know, get a haircut, work on my beard, try to take care of some of the wrinkles. Stay healthy, stay young, stay attractive for the glory of God. Also dealing with mental things, temptations and frustrations and deeper things inside of my psyche. I've been working on some of those things. We say that we're the temple of God, yet we're sloppy, we're overweight, we're impatient, and we don't want to do the work ourselves. Well, this is the work that needs to be done. We can be Hiram, but we can find joy in God creating us and in joy of how people will see his good works in us and glorify God. That's the goal. The goal of self-analysis, self-reflection, and self-maintenance and building is for the glory of God, just like this temple was. And we will stand above others just like the temple does. It's important that we do this, but we do it with joy, not in a hurry to get it done so we can, count noses and nickels, but that we do it for the glory of God. Thank you.